Dory, thank you for popping on here today. I know we had some technical issues at the beginning, so hopefully we are smooth sailing on out. Clearly, I've known you, not clearly to the listeners, but I've known you for a while. Why don't
Yes.
you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do, and then we can move forward.
Awesome. Yes. First of all, Karen, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be part of your podcast. I am an intuitive health practitioner. And so, what that means is I specialize in using different modalities. Specifically, I use aromatherapy, energy clearing, sound frequency, muscle testing to clear out blocks and to help attain this nervous system balance. And most of the time, I'm working with individuals who are stuck. It could be health, emotions, in business, anxiety, and helping them to get momentum and to understand to trust their body and their mind so that they can live their lives to the fullest. So I do that with individual coaching and through courses that people can take as well.
I love that. And I love how what you do right now, it's something that kind of like magically evolved and became a thing of its own.
Yes.
And you didn't always do this. I remember you were a teacher before your kids were born. That was something that you did. That was what you went to school for.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about what your life looked like before this,
Yeah.
and we'll just map out the journey to this point.
Absolutely. I think that my life has been a series of different careers.
Yes.
And I think even before teaching, it goes back to my childhood, and I was a unique kid. I was in the theater. I was raised by the theater from the age of 3 to 19. I had been in 70 different productions,
Wow.
and many of them were professional theater. I was really fortunate in the community that I grew up in to have professional theater opportunities. And so I was constantly in shows. I had an agent in New York. I went to professional summer camp, and then I worked for professional theater as well. I had a career as a child in the theater. And so that was what I thought my life was going to be. I thought that I would go to college, study acting, and then go up to New York and try my luck there. And then I met my now husband,
Yeah.
and he's not in the theater. And it was this really cool, eye opening experience of, hey, there's something else besides what my path was going to be. And pretty quickly realized I want to just see what else is out there. Theater, I can always fall back on that. I have my talent, that's not going to go away, but let me just see what else I can do with my life. And so I transferred schools. I started at one school and transferred to Virginia Tech and looked at what I could do with the 3 years that I had left. And I found human development as a major. And truly, it had nothing to do with what I would do after college. My mom gave me this great advice when I transferred. She said, just find a major that makes you happy and that you love the classes. I was like, huh, okay. And that made me happy too, because I think I always wanted to just be a professional student. I just always wanted to learn. And so when my mom gave me permission to say, take the next 3 years and take classes that you love, and something will come from that. And so I did. And so from there, I got my bachelor in science and then realized, oh, I could take this and turn it into education. And so then I got my master's in elementary education. And so then I just entered teaching because that's what you do. You go from one thing to the next.
Mhm.
And so I did that. I taught for several years. I put my all in it. We had gotten married at that point. We had purchased a home. We had a cat and a dog. We were living the life. And I was doing great. I was doing really well. I was able to stretch my creativity, and I felt like I was always on stage, which was nice. When you're in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
classroom,
yeah.
you're always pulling out things
Mhm.
from that life in theater. And
Can I ask
I,
you a question about something before you go? First of all, I think that was so incredible for you in your first year. Be like, huh, let's just see where this else takes me. Like, it doesn't have to be all like acting. Let's see what else. Do you think it sounds like you had very supportive parents that kind of supported or let me ask you this before I assume this. Did you have parents that kind of supported imagination and creativity and pivoting and let's try this? And or even as an actor, do you think that led to you being a little bit flexible in that?
You know, what's really funny is I would never call myself flexible
Oh,
in that part of my life. In fact, it was probably only in the last maybe 5 years that I would say that I go with the flow. And my kids probably still don't think that I truly do. But no, I think that if anything, that yes, I had very supportive parents, my mom especially. She just wanted me to be happy.
mm,
And I was very unhappy my first year of college. And so she said, it doesn't really matter what your degree is and just finish, just do something and finish. I think my dad was probably confused. He
mhm.
said, wait, this has been your life, this has been your dream, and now it's changed. But at the same time, he was supportive. He was happy that I lived closer for sure. And
Because where were you before for when you were school for acting?
I went to Vanderbilt, which
Okay.
actually isn't known for its theater program, but has a really cool theater department there. And we had found it. And truly, if I stuck with theater, it would have given me such a great education.
Mm.
I had fallen out of love of theater after doing it for 16
Yeah.
years and doing it so much. I was burned out.
And I
I
think
don't
that part of like I fell out of love with it. And I was like, I think there's so many women who choose a career path and it changes or they change or things in their life change and it doesn't quite fit
yeah.
in their lives anymore. And I would love for women to have that permission to explore, even if it's like what I call like toe dipping, like just get your feet wet, take a little piece of it. You don't have to completely pivot, but just to be a little bit more flowy, even if you may not feel flowy, but like just to explore a little bit more. And that's so great that you recognized it then that it's just, I don't know, this is what I want to continue doing. So, anyways, I just think that's great at such a young age to, even though you never considered yourself flowy then, but at such a young age to recognize that this isn't what I want and then have the parents to support that as opposed to, you know what, this is what we picked and you're going to make that commitment. You're going to continue because that's the commitment you made. I love that. Anyways.
Yeah, any pressure that I ever had was always my own pressure that I placed on myself. It
Mm,
was never from my parents. And that's something that I've realized growing older and working through the healing that I've gone through is every single piece of guilt, every single negative emotion that I clear out, it's all that I've placed on myself. It was never from someone else.
mm,
And that's really empowering too, is, oh, I don't have to worry about someone else. My mom, funny enough, she lived a life of different careers as well. She went from being a bank teller to a 4-H extension agent
mm.
to a school counselor to a career counselor to a dance instructor. She just has
So
had,
she kind
yeah,
of had that framework and that experience to know what it's like, that feeling, that itch to try to something different.
exactly. And what was neat is seeing her go through each of those stages. It wasn't like she woke up one day and she wanted to do something different. And that's not how it worked for me either. I've listened to your podcast and it's amazing to hear the stories of the women who that has happened. They woke up and they said, this is not what I want to be doing. But for me and also for my mom, it was a slow drip.
Yeah.
And it was just all of a sudden, it was like, oh, okay, the shift has been happening and now I'm just going to embrace it.
Yeah. And I know because I know you and I know your journey and I know the things that you shifted to and then shifted away from and then shifted to something else. Again, speaks to, okay, this isn't working. Or, I do have this desire. Let's go into it. Let's lean into it. And I think there's so many points in our life where like we think we want something and that thing isn't what we want, but that thing propels us to the thing that we ultimately want. And so by
Yes.
like stifling that energy and stifling ourselves to explore something, it might stifle that end result, that evolution that we
Mhm.
might be eventually called to. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So I want to circle back to what you were saying before I interrupted you about you were married, you had your dogs, your two dogs, and go from there. I
And
think I know where
yeah,
you're
and I was teaching. I was doing great. Doing, I was so fortunate in the school that I had been placed in that we had kids that passed all of the tests, and we knew they were going to pass all the tests. So we didn't have, yes, we had to teach to the test, which is a whole other piece of education that we can talk about and another podcast and another day. But we had things we didn't have to worry about.
Mhm.
And so it gave us the flexibility as teachers. It gave me the flexibility to be creative with my lessons. And so I did a lot of out of the box thinking in my lessons. I was one of the big STEM teachers at this school and leading that movement. And I was entering contests and I was winning contests for the lessons we were creating. And it was neat, but I was burned out. I went really hard, and teaching is not for the faint of heart. It is so trying.
Yes.
And so I was burned out. So when I became pregnant with my twins, I said, okay, this is perfect. This is my excuse to get out of here.
Yep.
And it was one of those really nice things that I felt held back. I felt, okay, people are depending on me. People are expecting me to stick with it. I just paid off my student loans, literally paid off my student loans, and then I got pregnant. And so I thought, people are expecting this is my life, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so having my babies was my excuse to step away.
Let's talk about the outside influence, the thoughts that we go through where you're not enjoying it, you're burnt out, you're having a major transition in your life going from like married, no kids to kids but twins, which I know you haven't mentioned yet, but twins. And that whole, all that adjustment, you're like realizing that again, you've been probably wondering if you should make a pivot, and this was like your reason to pivot. And
Right.
then you're either having those thoughts through your mind of like, how much money did I spend on this education and this commitment? And I wanted to do this. And how do I not want to do it? Or other people from the outside in looking at this is crazy. Like she's an amazing teacher and she's won all these awards and everyone loves having her. She'd be crazy to switch. Can you speak to like, how did you, it's easy to, when you become a mom, that your children become your whole world, that it's easy to be like, I'm a stay-at-home mom,
Mhm.
so I don't have time or room for teaching. It's easy to use that as not the excuse, but it's more acceptable to be like, I'm going to,
Oh, I totally used it as an excuse. I had twins, so daycare would have cost the same as my paycheck.
mm,
That was truly
yep,
what I put on the outside. And there was so much truth to that. It was a way for me to deflect and to not own what I was feeling. Obviously, healing has happened since then. And for my next pivot, I will be able to, this is why I'm pivoting, and be able to speak truthfully to that. But yeah, it was blame. I was putting blame on that.
mm. And
Yeah.
so that was your rationale, your way to reason
It
that.
was.
Yeah,
It was. It was. But really behind that, it was exhaustion
yeah,
and it was
I hear
overwhelm,
you.
and
Yeah.
it was questioning if I was doing the right thing for these children.
Hmm.
I was able to provide a really cool experience for them, and I'm still very close to many of those families 10 years later after leaving the classroom. And so that part, I don't regret any of it, but I just wonder if, and again, that's a whole other podcast on where I was and how I was fitting into what education looked like in our state. So,
Yeah. I want to move things forward a little bit because I want to spend some time talking about what you do now and how your life has shifted now. But before we get to that point, let's talk about the next thing you pivoted to. And we don't have to get into like too much details, but the business that you were doing and the decision to leave that business and the way that you worked through a lot of outside comments. And are you okay to talk about that?
sure,
Okay, 'cause I think
absolutely.
this is we don't have to go, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about it, but just more so the process for you and what kind of drew you to it and then your decision to leave it. And I know that caused a huge stress for you as well as just like a huge
It,
crazy time. And
it
so
was.
yeah, I would love to like
Yes, it
again like the mind stuff and how you worked through it and how did you not stick to or fall back into like, okay, fine, I'll stay because for these people, I'll stay. I would love to just I think that's going to
Yeah,
help so many people. So let's go into that
absolutely.
story about, so you, after you decided when you were staying home with your kids, you decided you wanted to get into something, and that led
Yeah,
to,
I I was I was not meant to be fully a stay-at-home
yeah.
mom, at least at that point in my life. I needed some sort of adult interaction that
Mhm.
wasn't just a child smiling
Yep.
when they had a dirty diaper. Like
Yep.
there's more. For me, I needed more.
I think a lot of moms listening to this would like wholeheartedly agree.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, yeah, exactly. And it doesn't take anything away from our love for our children. It's just I needed adult interaction. And so we had a health issue come up, and someone suggested essential oils, that I try
Mhm.
essential oils. And after several months of laughing behind this woman's back and thinking that she was crazy and all that thought, I was intrigued enough to try it. And then from there it was like the floodgates opened up, that I entered into the world of natural health, and I entered it through aromatherapy, but then it became this whole understanding of toxins
Yeah.
and all that plays. And so it was with a one particular company, and very quickly I loved that I could use my teaching, I could use the way that I had interacted with people on stage. So I was using all of these gifts that I had honed over my different careers and different lives, and put them into this. And it was fun because I had this thing that I was building, and I had an outlet, and I could travel, and I sent my husband to Nepal because of it, and we went on a cruise. We had really cool experiences. I wrote books, and so I got to experience that. I podcasted. So I had a lot that I was doing, but I realized that I didn't want to manage other people.
Mhm.
And I was falling out of love of that aspect of it, is that I wanted to, what's the best way of saying it? I wanted to work one on one with people. I wanted to connect and do the belly to belly work.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel like I was able to do that. And I felt like my hands were tied and
Mhm.
my mouth, there was tape over my mouth. I feel like there was a lot that I couldn't do. And as I was learning more, because I was a forever student, there was a lot that I was told I couldn't say and couldn't do. And it took me about 2 years. It was probably during 2020, during the pandemic, that I started really playing around with the idea of what happens if I step back, and
Yep.
what happens if I step away. And I was like, I can't do that. I would let so many people down. They're depending on me. I've made a name for myself. What would they say? What would they do? And so I felt like I couldn't do it. And yet at the same time, I just kept dreaming, oh, what would it be like if I had my own place and I saw my clients, and what if? And I would play with different aspects of that, but then I wouldn't fully go all in.
But I love that you asked the question, like, what if it were to look this way? What if I were to do something different? And I think that in itself, like, you get so much clarity, and again, can lead to that toe dipping, or just can lead you into feeling it in your body. Like, I would imagine that felt so much lighter compared to what you were doing
It,
currently at that time.
it did only because it was cool to think of what it could be like.
Mhm.
And it was terrifying. No, terrifying is not the right word. Stifling would probably be the best word, because I thought, I can't walk away. There
Mhm.
are too many people. There are hundreds of people who would think XYZ
Mhm.
if I went away. And after 2 years of that, I couldn't not do it anymore. And so I said that was it.
Yeah.
That was time. It was time for me to step away. And a lot of people said, what does that look like? And I said, I'm completely stepping away. I'm closing my account. I'm done. I'm done with that, because I can't be half in.
Yeah.
I have to be able to have my hands untied. I have to be able to move forward in the way that I want to. And I couldn't do that any other way.
And I think, or do you think that this feeling of stifled and not feeling like you're not enjoying it anymore, and now you want to look into something else, do you think that's reminiscent of in your first year in college and kind of feeling stifled and not enjoying it, and then pivoting and then having the support of your family to support you so that in this situation it's, oh, I pivoted, I lived, nothing happened to me. I
Yeah.
survived, I had support, I was actually a nicer, better person afterwards. Do you think that kind of gave you the courage to do it again because you had already experienced it in a different capacity?
I think so. And I think what it was is I stopped. This is probably, I don't know how I can say this that doesn't sound heartless and like I'm not caring. The best thing that I can do is say that in 2020, when we were all just home,
Mhm.
I was able to depend on my family. And it was the four of us. It was my husband and our kids. And that became the most important aspect of life. And it always was, but that hadn't been my priority. My
Right.
priority before was so divided. And it was because of that experience and because of really honing in on that as my central hub of life that I think it gave me the reminder that it didn't really matter what other people thought.
Ah, love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, what you moved into and what you do now is so incredible. And before we get into this part and you talking about what you're doing now and like how you're helping people, whether it's one-on-one individually or people virtually, I love that everything that you've done, whether it's from growing up acting to teaching to all that stuff, it's like everything builds upon each other, and like never what nothing was ever a waste, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like nothing was ever done and you didn't need it, everything was just piled up. And it's so like this whole concept of teaching, like I like what would people think that I've spent this time teaching? You use teaching now, like in the way that you're teaching even muscle testing and stuff. Like you're using, so I think a lot of people like in their heads, what if I change or what if I shift or I spent all this money on this training? Like you literally will either take snippets of it that you would not have learned if you didn't do it, or you incorporate what you learned, but you carry it with you. And I think for you, because you've had so many different pivots and experiences, I think that's so beautifully represented in what you do now. How I literally can see, oh my God, it's almost like she just took a whole wagon with her with all of her skills and just rolled it over into her next thing.
Which is why I really had to hone in on my own intuition because otherwise I look at that wagon of all the tools and I'm like, oh gosh, what do I pick?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what does this person need? Do they need nutrition? Do they? And
Mm,
so that's why it's really nice to let things go and then just let intuition take over or muscle testing if
right.
your intuition is not quite there
Yeah.
yet.
So let's talk about what you do now, because now you work at an amazing, I've never been there, but I've heard of it and I don't know what you would call it. To me, it's like some sort of spa, but I don't know if you would qualify it as. Um,
I have trouble putting a finger on it as well. Uh, it is a beautiful therapeutic healing arts center.
mhm,
And so most of the women that work there are massage therapists.
mhm,
And so that's really what people will come for is massage therapy. And we have an esthetician, and then here I am, an aromatherapist and a holistic health practitioner. And so what's really cool is that clients can come in if they know they want a lymphatic drainage massage, they can have that. Or if they just want a deep tissue, or if they want specific facials, that's fine. And we have really therapeutic options. But then if they want some more deeper level healing that comes from that energetic component, then that's where I can come in. And so oftentimes I'm seeing people first before they go to a massage therapist, and we are doing energy clearing and we are looking at trapped emotions and clearing those out. And you can't clear out everything in one session, but we're at least setting a foundation so that when they go to wherever else they go, or if they keep seeing me, I have many people that just keep seeing me,
mhm.
that we can keep building on that and clearing out all of the layers of things that have been trapped.
Yeah, because just for the listeners who are listening, like a lot of things that we experience physically often have an emotional component to it. So it's
Mhm.
working on that root emotion and clearing that helps, probably would even help the treatment of what they're receiving from other providers to work more efficiently. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And I
I'll,
love all that. I love that you do that. Go ahead.
it
Sorry.
is. No, it's okay. I'll tell you a quick story, just if anyone is, how does this work? So
Yeah.
there, I entered all of this years ago, and it was a specific technique that uses aromatherapy and this somatic understanding. So the body mind understanding. And so I was leading a seminar with couple hundred people in the room, and we were passing out the oils that they could use with it, and they were identifying a goal that they wanted to work on. And anyways, this couple came up afterwards to me and they said, Dory, my husband, she said, my husband's knee pain is gone.
Mm.
And I said, that's really cool. And she said, it's been there for years, it is gone. And it was because the emotions that he was working through were trapped in the knee.
Yep.
And so when the emotion had been released, the knee pain was gone. It had resolved itself. And I saw them a couple of months later, and it had only recently come back. And so then we were able to work through that again. But it's true, our emotions and our physical ailments are so interconnected.
They totally are. I have a similar story where, so I ended up breaking my ankle in December, which I think was, again, some sort of divine orchestration for me to, I was taking on too much and for me to just have a reset. But this podcast came out of it. It was like my recovery project, basically. And I think I talk about it in like the second episode. But when the cast came on, or came off rather, and I was getting into physical therapy, everything was so weak because I literally had been sitting for 6 weeks, and then it was slow, and then I had to wear a boot for 6 more weeks after that. So it was like basically 12 weeks of me like having either sitting or minimal mobility. And so when I got into like even climbing up, walking up the stairs, like my quads and my knees were on fire. And so I went to go see this chiropractor. I call him like my magical wizard. He's just incredible. He does muscle testing and he does Akashic records. He does like all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
And he did, I think it's called quantum neurology. Have you heard of it?
No.
But it's so it's I don't quite know what it is, but it's basically using muscle testing and I don't know. It's whatever. A lot of chiropractors use it. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
describe it because I'm gonna butcher it. But anyways, it's incredible. So he did a few things, and I was an hour in his room, and when I left and I walked up my first step, I'm like, there's no pain. Like I would almost tense and wince my body because it was so much pain. There was none. I could go up and then go down, and there was like nothing. And there hasn't really been much back, but there was like I think some sort of emotional component next to it. There's a lot with emotions that he does too. So this whole idea that like the root of a lot of things are emotions, and if you get to the root of it, like the expression of that emotion, what's being expressed in pain or disease or whatever, tends to either, like I said, receive the treatment better that you're receiving from other provider, or it might just go away because you treat it the reason why it's even happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the important thing is finding that balance so that it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So let's talk about how people can find you and if they wanted to work with you, and I know you have a couple of courses that you've created that people can get their hands on as well that could help them.
Absolutely. Yes. So I'm probably on Instagram more than anything. And so I'm just at Dory Doyle, Dory, just like the fish. And so that's probably where you can find me the easiest. But I have these courses that I call the unwind approach, and it's a full program. And they're different courses depending on how you want to go about it, or if you want to take all of them, then that's the full unwind approach program. But I teach muscle testing, I teach breathing mechanics, because so many people don't breathe properly, and if
Yeah.
we don't breathe, then we don't thrive.
Yeah.
And I teach
I love
breathing
that you
mechanics.
know that, by the way, because I see some things that you post, and that's stuff that I've received in my training as a speech therapist and myofunctional therapist. I understand the importance of nasal breathing and tongue resting along the palate and everything. And so when I see you sharing it, I'm like, huh, I love that she knows this too, because this is not, a lot of people don't know about it.
I do have to thank you,
Yeah,
because you had years ago, and I don't even know if you remember this,
I
you
think I
had
do remember.
we had talked about my daughter,
Yep.
which started us on years of myofunctional therapy with
Mm.
her, and it
Oh,
was life-changing for her.
right.
And so that was just a big piece of our life. So I thought, you know what, if I've learned this and I've learned it secondhand, then other people should know this.
Hmm.
And so I teach my clients this in private sessions, but I thought, you know what? If I'm teaching people in private sessions, everyone should at least have
Yeah.
access to this information. And so breathing mechanics, the vagus nerve, and working with our nervous system, understanding how our nervous system works because it's complex and we should have an understanding of it. It's something that I teach my children. So why shouldn't adults know it too?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then just understanding what our bodies can do and how we can read our body's cues. And that's where muscle testing comes in. And then how we can use aromatherapy as well.
Again, teaching and aromatherapy and being creative and putting it all together. Literally, it's every single thing that you've gone through that's like packaged together in this. So,
It
uh,
is.
I have all that stuff in the show notes of like your Instagram page and the courses that you were talking about if anyone wanted to check it out. But again, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. You homeschool your kids too, in addition to all that. So that could be a conversation for another day and how you balance time and all of it. But thank you
A lot
again
of
for
spinning
this.
plates,
Was that?
a lot of spinning plates,
Yeah.
and a lot
Yes,
of
for sure.
support. My husband and I are definitely a team in that. But yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
love that.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for what you are doing with this podcast and this series, because it is such a wonderful, enriching conversation that we should be having
Mhm.
and being okay with the shift.
Yes. Oh,
Because
I have goosebumps.
yeah, we
Yeah.
should. We should all be okay with that because there is only one thing that is certain, and that's that things are going to change.
I used to have this employer that I worked for 5 or 6 years when I was as a speech therapist when I worked at this private therapeutic place, like a preschool type place. And she was chaotic. She was, I don't think ever officially diagnosed, but I know people who knew of like personality disorders and just like basically said that's what she had because she was so erratic. You had no idea who you're going to get. But her favorite mantra that she would say is get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I feel like I say that, I reflect that a lot, or I hear other people say it, or I've been in like other practices where like something will change and I'm okay with it because I'm just so used to things pivoting. But someone had said, I heard on another podcast that imposter syndrome is actually it's actually good to be experiencing imposter syndrome because it means that you are expanding and you're growing, and then when you become very everything feels safe and it doesn't feel like you're doing anything different, then I'm not saying that you haven't grown, but it's almost like imposter syndrome is an indication that you are expanding. So it's like a good thing that you're feeling it.
Oh,
It
good,
just goes
because
back
I
to the whole.
certainly feel that.
I think we all
All
do. I
right.
mean, we're doing something different than what we've done or what we thought we were going to do as a child, and like the programming and conditioning around that and everything. So, like I said, that's a conversation for a different time. But again, thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation, and I can't wait to, I'll have you on again in the future about
Oh,
some other
thank
topic.
you, Karen. Thank you. I loved this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.